Hi, everyone. Excited to get started tonight. Looking forward to what I hope will be a very informative, powerful conversation. I definitely believe that my special guest will give so much light to this heavy conversation. And also, Amber. Amber will bring so much light. But I also believe that Amber is going to be bringing some very necessary information. So I'm so excited. We're going to have a Q&A towards the end. And so I think you all appreciate you all being on the call. I'm taking this call from Choctaw Land. Homa, Choctaw, and Chattahoochee tribes. And I am grateful for everyone who's joining now, who will listen to the replays. We usually keep them up for about 30 days. Now I'm realizing that I'm on, so maybe I don't know. Okay, yes, because maybe it's possible people didn't hear me. Amber, can you hear me?
I can hear you, girl.
Yes.
How you doing?
Hey, it's been a long time. I shouldn't have left
too long. Yes.
Well, I was just telling people I'm so excited. We're gonna have about an hour-long conversation. I keep these up for about an hour, like a 30-minute, not 30 days, so that people could come back and learn. But I'm just so grateful to you because I have a whole bunch of questions. And so I went into, I texted you, I was like, hey, girl, hey. Can you help me understand this? But also, can you help other people understand?
Yes. I mean, it's crazy.
I also want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Well, what's going to happen right now is that Amber's going to introduce herself.
Okay.
And at the top of this call, you're going to also tell people how to support you. We usually do that at the end, but we're going to start that at the top. So how people can learn from you, support your work. And then I'm going to talk about why we're having this conversation here, and then we're going to get into it.
Okay.
All right.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Sims. I am an attorney. That's what I do for a living, but really, I think of myself as a teacher.
Yes.
And a freedom fighter. I want us to be free, all of us. And I do that primarily by trying to take the information that I've been privileged to learn and explain it to people in practical, approachable, engaging ways so that folks can have the information they need to be empowered to make the best decisions for themselves and to, partake in this fight for freedom in a meaningful and an informed way. You can find me on Instagram at Amber W. Sims. I also co-host the Brokish podcast where we talk about all the broken-ish that this country has done to Black people and the ways that this country conspires to break Black people, but that we refuse and we remain unbroken. And so you can find us on Instagram at Brokish Podcast, and you can also find us wherever you listen to podcasts. So Apple, Spotify, wherever. So yeah. And I'm so excited to be here with one of my faves.
Look, this is me shooting my shot, just in case you ever need like somebody to guest on the podcast.
You already on the board. You already on the board. You already on the board.
All right. And I'm gonna tag all Amber's things on this on the live after I post it. So you'll be easily able to find that.
Okay.
Now, I got 5011 IG accounts. And so if anyone's like, well, Kina, why are you not having this conversation at the Anti-Blackness Project? Why are you having it over here with the people of the palette? Well, first of all, lots of people follow this page, not necessarily just Black folks, right? All types of people. But there was a reason, there was a strategy why I had this conversation at the Divesting from Whiteness page. So partially is because this is the page, Amber, where I do not my anti-racism work, because that's not the kind of educator I am. I always tell people I am not an anti-racist educator. I likely think of myself as a decolonial educator because I'm looking at larger colonial violence.
Yep.
The racial oppression is just part of that.
Exactly.
Right? Racial oppression is just a part of that. But I thought it was really important to bring this conversation over here because for a lot of people who started following this project, it was all about what do I do as someone who has privilege because of my racial identity, whatever, my economic identity, to create a better world, to help create shared humanity. And I think for a very long time, and you can, affirm this or disagree, sis, but, in the wake of Breonna Taylor, in the wake of George Floyd, I think a lot of people felt like, oh, that means that I have to fight against the police and just like learn from learn from Black folks. And I'm like, ooh, if you think that's the extent of the work, then you missing it, right? And so there are levels to this shit, right? And creating the possibility for racial equity means that you're willing to do the things to create a better world when it comes to economics, when it comes to creating opportunities for Black rest, for Black joy, and responding to, and this is the first time I've said this publicly, so I'm a little nervous. I don't want to get gathered on the internet, but I feel it so deeply, responding to the ethnic cleansing that the descendants of enslaved people have in the West.
Right? No, I received that.
Yeah, so, this is also the time where I want us to just acknowledge out loud, right? We are seeing the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, of people in the Sudan, across the DRC, Yemen, like pick a place where colonizing energy has not created violence, right? It's not just one. And it's been hard or difficult to assert in some spaces that what has happened to Black people in the United States is also ethnic cleansing, simply because it's not attached to like one military project. Does that make sense, sis?
Yes, right? It does.
Because it's been ongoing and it's so systemic that you can't even kind of notice it. It's like hidden in plain
normalized.
sight.
It's normalized. Yes. Absolutely.
So this is why this conversation is happening here, because for everyone, and as we all should be concerned about ethnic cleansing abroad, we still also have to be committed, at least the people who said they are committed, to the ethnic cleansing that is happening right here in our backyard.
Amen. Amen.
Right? Yeah. So this is why this conversation is happening here in mixed company. All right. I thought a lot about it. Here is where we are, right? We recognize that Black women receive less than 1% of venture capitalism, right? We recognize that Black women in particular, the highest, fastest group of entrepreneurs in the United States. We recognize that I got all this data, like that it takes Black women in the United States, the continental United States. I always want to say continental because the United States is empire. It's everywhere, all right? In the continental United States, 20 months to earn what white men make in a year.
That's right. That's right.
And this conversation is also close to my heart as a Black woman who's a solo entrepreneur. And baby, it's hard out here for a pimp.
Yes, yes. And it's so interesting that you start this conversation off grounding it in colonial violence, because what I hope people come away with today is recognizing how the law is used as an instrument of that violence. Mm-hmm. Not only is the law an instrument and an extension of imperial violence, it is also the chief means through which people gaslight Black people into internalizing anti-Blackness and into believing figments about this country that are just not true. I literally had to close the door in my office today in corporate America on the 31st floor while I was reading this opinion, because I kept gagging out loud. Like, the level of gaslight in this majority opinion, it is emblematic of the violence that you are talking about, because this opinion is literally an instrument of violence, and it is a gaslight like I've never seen before.
Okay, well, let's get into it, sis. Go ahead and let's tell people, because I plan on this me like my silent popcorn, because I came here to learn from you, girl.
Yes.
So tell the people what it is. Yeah. What's going
on? Before we even start with this opinion, I want us to back up a little bit so that we can just set the scene for how we get here to the point where we're being gaslit in 2024. So we all know about the famous landmark Supreme Court case of Brown versus Board of Education, right? Where the Supreme Court essentially ruled that separate could never be equal. And so it was the landmark case desegregating public education and really, to a large extent, desegregating public spaces here in the United States. The problem, though, with Brown versus Board of Education is it declares segregation to be constitutional, but it does not provide any tools by which people can go about actively doing the work of desegregating, right? Or pulling out the roots of racism that lead to segregation. So 15 years after Brown versus Board of Education, we have another landmark Supreme Court case, but this time in the wrong direction, called Milliken versus Bradley. So you have Detroit, the city of Detroit, which is actually trying to do the nuts and bolts work of desegregating, right? And so as a result of that, they are implementing a busing program, which a lot of major cities in the United States implemented busing in the aftermath of Brown to try to comply. And so the Detroit suburbs integrated with the public school system in the city of Detroit. And of course, as you can imagine, the folks in the suburb were like, hell to the no, to the no, no, no. So Milliken versus Bradley was a case that was initially brought by the NAACP to try to champion the desegregation program. And this time around, essentially, you have the Nixon court, which is radically different than the 1959 court, basically saying you cannot force desegregation, and that the only way that desegregation could be legally ordered in this Detroit school system was if the zoning lines in those particular school districts could be proven to have been drawn with explicitly racist intent. Otherwise, the suburban school districts could not be forced to integrate with the Detroit school systems in order to effectuate the ruling that came out of Brown. And almost prophetically, of course, you have a dissent by Justice Thurgood Marshall. And what he essentially says is, y'all are killing Brown versus Board of Education with this ruling today, because we have set forth in prior precedent that desegregation is the law of the land, and you are stripping public entities of the ability to effectuate that ruling by actively doing the work to crush what is causing the segregation. And so with that in mind, the first gaslight is how we get to a place where this is a country that recognizes segregation as a problem, but leaves us with no legal tools to undo the residual impacts of it that we have continued to live with in the aftermath of Brown. And so if we kind of start with the question of how we got here, that is how. Because we created this law that says, oh, no, you can't segregate. You can't have racial intent. But then what are the tools to undo it? Because as we all know, and as history has shown us, people didn't just stop being racist and having a desire to segregate and to have discriminatory intent just because Brown became the law of the land, right? And so I see somebody, no, Thurgood Marshall was not doing the gaslighting. He dissented in the opinion. Yes. So that's not what we're saying.
Yeah, not our great ancestors.
Yes. And so when we get to a place like where we are now with this case, a Fearless Fund, you have people who are obviously still trying to do the work of desegregating, recognizing the residual impacts of racism in places like access to venture capital. So you have this fund set up to help people least likely to get access to the mainstream funds, which statistically are Black women. And so, I mean, child, I don't have no words for Edward Bloom. Well, I'm sure we're going to talk about it.
But I feel like we got to talk about somebody, Uncle and Daddy. Right?
Yes.
So for all the new people who don't know what Fearless Fund is, right? Just to be clear, the Fearless Fund, shout out to those amazing women, is an organization that makes race-based grant making. It provides race-based grant making for women of color to support entrepreneurship, right? So it invests in women of color businesses by seeking grant money to provide seed level or Series A financing.
Right.
Their mission is to bridge the gap in venture capital funding, right, for women of color, so that people like me
Yes.
can build scalable growth. Like, I need to like name myself in this conversation.
Yes.
People like Kina can create like scalable growth to their entrepreneurial journeys. And it is led by Black women. It has provided the seed money to more than Black women. I think that's also important to name,
yes.
right? Because we are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs. Edward Bloom, all right, I feel like we can't say his name no more because that would be 3 times and it's like Beetlejuice. So like, you know, this will just shut down all of a sudden, like the IG. But he is the Santa Claus. He's the Santa Claus for the other side, who is the one who bought us the hits like Fisher versus University of Texas, right? The Students for Fair Admissions. He's the reason why affirmative action got gutted, right? He is behind an organization, and I forget the name of his organization, but basically has brought legal cases before courts, including the Supreme Court, to rid any race-based programming, like, from our very eyes. So he's been associated with a lot of high-profile legal cases. He would be considered, well, or I guess he would name himself as a political activist and legal strategist to support a colorblind ideology, right? So I think his premise is like, by seeing color, you are performing like racism. That's the racism, seeing the color, naming and identifying, right?
He don't believe that shit, but anyway.
But yeah, but that's his legal precedent, right? That's how he goes into these cases. That's his legal mind. So he is the person. Oh, Shelby County versus Holder. So he ain't new to. He's not new to this. He's true to this.
That's right.
Like the streets, right?
That's right.
So it's, and I will say this. I've said this before. White people don't create stuff, but they do know how to manage the long game, right? And that's what he's done. He has created a long game strategy, right? And so those are some of the people who are players. And so if you could tell us the ruling that happened last week, give us a little bit about that ruling, that would be great.
Yeah. I also want to just start out by pointing out that what is really extra sickening about this is that Edward Bloom's Alliance for Equal Rights, American Alliance for Equal Rights, they have literally ripped off the playbook of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. The work that he's doing, it rips off the setting up test cases that was, created by Charles Hamilton Houston, Thurgood Marshall, Constance Baker Motley, all of these fantastic attorneys doing righteous work. They have literally ripped it off and gutted it and perverted it.
Well,
but anyway,
now, no, don't go, because stay here for a second. So this is what I mean when I say people of the power typically don't create, they mimic.
Yes. And so this work of setting up test cases with the anticipation of getting favorable or getting good rulings from the Supreme Court. I mean, Charles Hamilton Houston literally wrote the book on how to do this work, with everything from, Rosa Parks, like that was set up by the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, test plaintiffs. They have literally ripped this playbook off to undo the work of the civil rights movement in desegregating and creating an equitable America. And so that
we're going to
literally
talk about implications later. So now let's talk about the verdict.
So this is a case where the Fearless Fund, like Kina said, set up to offer venture capital. What the American Alliance for for Equal Rights did is they got 3 test plaintiffs who they were allowed to proceed anonymously. So it's just owner A, B, and C. 3 white women who basically created affidavits saying that they were women entrepreneurs, that the access to the capital offered by the Fearless Fund would positively impact their business, but that they weren't able to apply because they were not Black women. And Bloom took those affidavits and sought injunctive relief. And so what injunctive relief is relief from a court that keeps you from doing something. So in this case, the injunctive relief would have kept the Fearless Fund from awarding out money in the competition that was open at the time that these 3 white women allegedly wanted to apply. And so what people really need to know about injunctive relief is it is a type of emergency relief, because essentially when you are asking for an injunction, you are saying to the court, I need you to act immediately, because if you don't act immediately, I'm subject to irreparable harm. So that's part of the reason why this case was able to be fast-tracked so quickly. And that's part of the genius of the strategy when you seek injunctive relief, is you get a fast track to rulings because you allege irreparable harm. And so that's essentially what they did. And they did it on 3 bases. So the first basis is they said that this was a violation of 42 USC section 1981 subpart A. And I'm going to read that to y'all because, again, I just want you to see how this country gaslights people. This law specifically says all persons within the jurisdiction of the United States shall have the same right in every state and territory to make and enforce contracts, to sue, be parties, give evidence, and to the full and equal benefit of all laws and proceedings for the security of persons and property as is enjoyed by white citizens. That's what the law says. So the purpose of this law was to protect Black people, minorities. So the law that Bloom is suing on, that he is basing his discrimination claim on, was a law that was created to remedy discrimination, okay? And so essentially he says that, yes, this is a violation of that. It allows for discrimination in private contracting, and that's prohibited by the law. And he also says that, of course, you know, they should not be allowed to do this because they are not remedying anything, because they are permanently barring all non-Black female applicants from ever applying. So this isn't like remedial. This is them basically being all out racist. That's what the contention is. And so initially, Fearless Fund responded by saying, well, this isn't a contract, right? We're not entering into a contract to paint somebody's house or sell a car. We're giving away money. However, the counter argument is that there are terms and conditions to entering into the contest, which legally create a contract. That's what Bloom argues. And then the Fearless Fund also says, well, even if it is a contract, our First Amendment rights trump the statutory rights because that's a constitutional protection. So we should have the right to express. This is expressive conduct, which should be protected speech. We are expressing our concern and our solidarity with Black women who have historically been disproportionately unable to access venture capital funds. And so by offering the funds the way we are expressing speech that speaks out against that should be protected by the First Amendment. And then they also say that this is a remedial program, because remember what we talked about earlier. We recognized that segregation was an issue. We overturned it. And there are certain exceptions under Section 1981 and other Title VII protections that say discrimination is allowed if it is remedial. In other words, if you are creating a preference system in order to remedy discrimination, there is a small government exception carved out to allow you to do that. And Fearless Fund said that they should fall into it. Well, the 11th Circuit issued an opinion saying no. They rejected all of the arguments. They found that this was a contract that was covered by 42 USC 1981 subsection A, that there was discrimination, that this was not speech protected by the First Amendment. This was an act, a discriminatory act. And so they said that the First Amendment protects speech, but not discriminatory acts. And they said that Fearless Fund was discriminating against white people, and that that act of discrimination was not covered by the First Amendment. And then finally, it said that the Fearless Fund did not fall into that small sliver of exception for remedial because it didn't have, and this is my favorite part of the BS they feed us, it is unconditionally only available to Black women. It doesn't say it's available to Black women until racism is cured, or it doesn't say it's available to Black women until we get to a certain point where this is no longer necessary. It 100% across the board permanently bars non-Black women from entering. And so because of that, it can't be considered remedial. It's considered discriminatory because it doesn't have any built-in, essentially kind of like the expiration clause in the affirmative action case. Like, how can you require people to put a sunset on the remedial part when there's no sunset on the racism that gave birth to it, right? So anyway, that's basically what the court found. And the court found that because of those reasons, that the Fearless Fund was a violation of the law and that the injunctive relief was appropriate. And so it left the injunction in place, and it enjoins, or it bars, the Fearless Fund from operating and giving out any funds. So yeah, that's where we are right now.
So I want two things right quick. So if you were the legal representation for the Fearless Fund, what would be their legal course of action right now? I mean, this is hypothetical. Well, like, you know what I'm saying? But like, you know, surely they're going to fight this, right? You're right. So like, what does this end up at the Supreme Court? Like, what's the next kind of legal path this goes on, you think?
I mean, so yes, technically it could go to the Supreme Court, but if you're asking me if I was an attorney for the Fearless Fund, if I would do that, no. The 11th Circuit, which is the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals that covers the state of Georgia, is a very conservative circuit. It's known for, you know, being conservative, just like, for example, you in Louisiana, I'm in Texas. Fifth Circuit, probably right under the Fifth Circuit, will be the 11th Circuit. So I would not strategically go to the Supreme Court because I would not expect a different ruling. I would do what Fearless Fund did during the pendency of the trial, which is that they tried to rewrite the rules for entering the contest. The problem is Fearless Fund tried to argue it wasn't a contract, but it said in the terms and conditions when you entered, this is a contract. So a contract is simply just a bargain for exchange. And Fearless Fund said, hey, you get to enter to compete to win this money. And in exchange for that, we get to use you on our Instagram. We get to use you for publicity. We get to get access to your business stuff. We get to take photos of you. And so the court, rightfully so on that one issue, said, yes, that's a contract, because that is a contract. That is a contract. And so I think because of that, really, we just have to get creative in how we figure out how to put the money in the hands of the people who they are trying to get it to, because I don't think they're going to get a different opinion out of this Supreme Court that we have at all. Yeah.
Okay. I want us to get into implications, but before we get into the implications of the verdict, I just want to really, let's take a second, like, because I'm having a visceral reaction, right? So Amber and I talked a little bit about Abigail Fisher versus University of Texas. So in 2012, Abigail Fisher was a young white woman who she got denied entry into the University of UT, which is a research-run university, which also BTW, she got into another research-run institution. So it's not like she couldn't go to college. So like, let's just put that out there. It wasn't like she was denied admission into university, okay? But she made the precedent that because she was white and because UT had a quota system, she was unfairly treated, all right? So here we go. White women, right? And this is important, again, another reason why we're having this conversation here at Divesting for Whiteness, is because the pathology of white womanhood, right, which plays the victim, which plays the, wait a second, I should be able to enter into all the spaces, right? And so those three, I think you said, was it 3 case studies?
There are
right? Those,
3 women, the 3 anonymous. Of course, they don't put their
yeah.
name on it, but the 3
So
anonymous, yeah.
We don't have a way of knowing, but I don't necessarily think Edward Bloom had to like search near and far for 3 women who felt like some kind of way. You get what I'm saying? I don't think he had to like search all over the internet, right? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, and I would even take it a step further, Amber, and say these weren't like 3 MAGA women.
Yeah, you know what? It's so interesting you bring that up, because that is the dissent. The Justice Rosenbaum, who wrote a dissent in this case, I don't often enjoy dissents. He wrote a bomb ass dissent, and basically what he did was he called cap on these white women. He was like, okay, because there's a thing in the law where you have to have standing to sue, which means that, you know, if I hit your car, my mother can't sue you, or you can't sue my mother. You have to sue me because I'm the person who did it to you, right? So you have to. So standing is that you have to have a real case or controversy, and you have to go after the person you have the case or controversy with. And that's what Justice Rosenbaum basically said, is that these are just 3 white women who don't identify themselves, who are complaining. They complain under the cloak of anonymity. And he says that basically he accuses them of faking. He was like, they do not have a real issue with this case because they are not legitimately seeking the funding. And that the fact that they got a pass on that, and they get to do it under the cloak of anonymity, is even more flagrant. And I'm so glad he called it out in the dissent in this case, that you have these white women who are essentially getting to play victim by filling out an affidavit without really putting any skin in the game to show how they are affected by this money going to Black women. Yeah.
And I also think, just in case, because I stand behind the stuff I say on the internet, but I do want to name the fact that because of the patriarchy, right? White women, there's a wealth gap there too, in terms of entrepreneurship dollars and stuff too. So I don't want to sit here and act like that's not a thing, right?
Absolutely.
That white women aren't negatively impacted by a lack of economic parity. That's real. That's very real, right? So I want to stand in that. But the ways in which, that's a lot of my work is about, like, the pathology of white womanhood, right? And so the ways in which white women are constantly utilized by white men, right, to do violence to Black women, to Black people, to the Black community, that is consistent, Amber, right? That's not even something that started like 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely.
Right? White women have been, Frances Bacon, that's the woman who rewrote Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman speech, right? And completely changed it around. Sojourner Truth, who is a woman whose first language is Dutch, not English, never uttered the phrase, ain't I a woman?
Correct.
But that well-meaning white woman came up behind her and revised it to make it seem more like a slave, I guess. But the point is, like, that's consistent, the ways in which white women are used to do violence, right? So I think that needs to be highlighted. I think that's really important. And that's why I think that, because listen, for all the white women who stay in these streets, right, talking about advocating for themselves and other people, like, look what 3 of y'all did this. So I think that's really important to, like, acknowledge that, name that. That's why white women need to have a response to these kind of situations. Because they are usually in the center, in the grips of it.
Yes. And I think it's also important because when you think about the fact that this case literally could not exist without those women. Without those women, you don't have a case. You don't have a justiciable controversy. you have to have white women who are willing to put themselves out there and allege that their inability to get access to the capital that is a part of Fearless Fund is hurting them in order for this case to go forward. And so, yes, what you're saying represents the heart of the case, because there literally is no case without complicit white women. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about implications, right? The first one for me, and then I'm going to pass it to you, is child, not y'all staying wanting to be victims of racism.
Yeah.
It's the reverse racism for me. I just, and then when you add that to like the context of now Donald Trump walking around talking about it's a two-tiered justice system. Wait, it became two-tiered 3 weeks ago. It's two-sided.
Right.
It's not fair.
Right.
So that's the first implication. Like, all this does is provide more data for that talking point. And I can't. This is where we are. This is where we are.
Yeah.
That's the first implication.
Yeah. And I think as an extension of that, to me, as a lawyer, the one that is the most dangerous is the way that we are legalizing and creating legal precedents around the myth of race neutrality. Because when you take a law like 42
Wait,
USC,
Amber, I need you to go a little bit back, because some people may not understand precedents. So if you can like kind of just give like a what that means.
Yeah. So precedent is essentially, if you think of the Supreme Court cases as Legos, precedent basically says that we have most respect for the Lego at the bottom, because as a society, what we have decided is that we value stability more than accuracy. So it is, for us as a society, more important for us to have a stable law that's predictable than it is for us to decide to change the law every so often. So there is something called precedence, which means that once a case is decided, unless it is just completely egregious, we follow the binding precedent of the highest court, right? And so that's why when the ruling came out overturning abortion, that was so surprising for a lot of people, because all of those judges sat up in their confirmation hearings
and said they were going to support precedent.
I will respect precedent. I will respect precedent. So that is what that is. That was what that concept is. It's basically we show a lot of respect for the Lego on the bottom, and we stack on top of it, and we don't disturb what's on the bottom unless it's super egregious.
I want to give another example. It's like when youngest kids say, like if your youngest says, well, you let, so no, it's reverse, because I feel like it's the oldest kids that say to your parents, well, when I was his age, I couldn't drive, I couldn't stay up to da 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 da. So we're saying you set a precedent, mom and dad.
That's right.
That people don't get licenses in this house. So
that's right.
You know what I'm saying? But you didn't let Jimmy over here in the corner.
Yes.
He's driving a Benz at 14.
Yes. Yes.
That's my not legal brain.
No, that's a perfect example of somebody invoking precedent to say you should do it the way we've done it.
I say that because Amber looks good. Amber's a partner and a parent. And so I just could only imagine your kids be like,
If I had $1 for every time I heard that's not fair, okay, I would be on a beach somewhere. Would not be on this live. Love you. Would not be here. Okay? Would be on a beach living my best life. Okay?
Okay. So you're saying this is creating a precedent for race neutrality. Yes. Legal jurisdiction for race neutrality.
Yes. So this myth of race neutrality is becoming binding precedent. And listen, America's always been a little bit delusional. So that's nothing particularly new.
Wait, you mean the country that founded itself upon religious persecution?
Oh, yes. And where a meritocracy, where all men were created equal, even though there were people who were literally put into the Constitution as fractions, but hey. But yeah, so that is so disturbing because this myth becoming precedent makes it harder for people to do the work. And I will tell you another reason why it's troubling, because now we're taking the teeth out of laws like 42 USC um, section 1981A, which clearly was written with remediating discrimination in mind. This was a law that specifically says in it that people who are not white should be able to enjoy the same privileges as people who are white. And so to then take that and weaponize it against non-white people who are literally trying to effectuate the meaning of the law and call what they're doing discrimination, it is dangerous and it is a gross misapplication of the law. And I will tell you that these people know exactly what they're doing, because to that, the implication, I wanted to just point out a footnote in here real quick, that because the court knows exactly what they're doing, because they brought it up in a footnote in the opinion. And it says that they do not want to even address the fact that 1981 is about, oh, here it is. It says, to tie up one loose end, we also reject any suggestion that Section 1981 protects only members of minority groups. Um, and it's crazy because that's literally what it says. And so they are literally telling us to our face that they have no intention of following the law as it is written. And so to me, that is the most dangerous implication in all of this, is that we are following more down the road of Milliken versus Bradley, of really giving people no tools to walk out what it looks like to desegregate and plant seeds of equity.
Mm-hmm. I think another implication here is that for people who do social entrepreneurial work, for people who run nonprofits, this decision impacts any kind of race-based grant making too, right? So if you're someone who, let's say, has a nonprofit that is applying for grants, like from the Kellogg Foundation, to create racial equity programming, now there's precedent that endangers
Yes.
those kind of practices,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And it's a part of this. Well, I'm sorry, continue.
No, I was about to say, not only does it endanger it, but now you're really creating a situation where you're putting these nonprofits in danger, because essentially they're not, in order to do race conscious grant making of any kind, you're essentially going to have to not create any language around it that could be construed as a contract, any language that protects the nonprofit. So, for example, you give out $20,000 to somebody, and then you post a picture of them with their check in the newspaper saying we gave it out. Well, without the guardrail language up, I mean, technically that person can sue you for using their name, their image, their likeness. And so you are creating a whole lot of risk to manage. And I can tell you, I manage risk for a living. I'm an insurance lawyer. What happens when people do not want to manage risk, because managing risk is very expensive? They just eliminate the risk. Like, for people who cannot afford to manage the risk, they eliminate it. And so what I am afraid of, to the point you're making, is that a lot of these nonprofits are going to decide that it is too expensive to give out race-based or race-conscious grants, because they don't want to get sued, not only by people like Edward Bloom, but if things go bad on the back end with grantees of the money, they're going to decide it's too expensive to do it, and they're just going to stop. And then we're going to be back at square -50.
And I want to tie this to something that has nothing to do with Fearless Fund, but I do think it's important to connect the dots. It is, what you just said makes me think of the doctors in my state who are actually starting not to see people into their second trimester.
Yep.
Because of fear, of legal pursuit in the event they have to provide life-saving care.
That's a perfect example of what happens when we put a premium on risk management in a particular area. That's a perfect example. Mm-hmm.
So I want to create a space where if people have some questions, they can add the questions in Q&A, and then we're going to talk about what people can do in support of Fearless Fund, and just kind of like, how do we move forward in the face of this verdict, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, so if anyone has any questions, because y'all don't have to have questions for me, have questions for the brilliant Amber. Does anyone have any questions about any of the things that we've shared so far? Feel free to share them in the comment section. We'll give you all a couple seconds. I think you just did such a great job. There's some stuff that I wrote down. I'm like, I'm about to follow up on that, right? Also, Thurgood Marshall is the first Black Supreme Court justice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not to be confused with Clarence. I know, since I just
had. We don't even want to mention them in the same breath.
Cannot, won't.
Justice Marshall tried to tell us, okay, when they announced that, he was like, listen, I would rather be replaced by a white man.
Wait, hold on, sis.
Thurgood Marshall said that. Yes, he said, I would rather be replaced by a white man than to be replaced by somebody who is the same skin color as me, who does not share the same values and commitment to justice as I do. He said it in a press conference.
I did not know that.
He tried to tell us. Justice Marshall tried to tell the people.
So, okay? what you're telling me is our good ancestor Thurgood Marshall was like, they not like us? Like, he tried.
He was Kendrick Lamar, okay? Thurgood Lamar tried to tell us that he was not like us. He did.
Not like
he did. He tried to tell us.
He's not a colleague.
Yes. Justice Thurgood Lamar tried to tell us. He did. He did.
So I don't see any questions. Let's go ahead and talk about, like, what should people be doing? And let's start with white women, because I'm just so heated by that. Like, again, in case people just joined, Amber made very clear to us that verdict would not have been able to get any traction if 3 white women hadn't stepped up and said, because they ain't put their name on it. So, like, at least with Abigail Fisher, she was like, put my name on that shit. I'm so sure she does not go by the name Abigail Fisher, though. She can't.
I heard she does. She's on, yeah. She's on LinkedIn standing on everything.
Business with it.
Standing on business.
Damn. Do you think they get together and have, like, cocktail parties? Like,
I know she does paid speaking events on the right now. So I think, of course, as you can imagine, it's lucrative for her. And as a white woman, she has monetized her victimhood. And she does speeches now about her fight for justice as a justice warrior.
Her fight for justice. I'm sure her and MGT probably get lunch together.
Oh gosh, I'm sure they have.
I can't. The words. I don't even. Maybe Robin DiAngelo can find him. That was shade.
Oh, I caught.
No, maybe she can find them. Okay, so what should people be doing?
Well, I feel like, one of the biggest things that people can do right now is to try to support people who are doing work like the Fearless Fund, because this is expensive. Lawyers are expensive. Litigation is expensive. And it costs a lot of money. And I can tell you that as this case has progressed through the appellate courts, financial backers like Visa, like other corporate, they have put their money on hold. And so the biggest thing you can do, particularly for people of means and for white women, put your money where your mouth is and support these Black women in fighting this fight, because it's expensive. It's expensive. And I tell people all the time that insurance companies are not the only people who indemnify, because what is going to happen for...
Sis, I need you to tell us what that means. That was a word.
I am. I'm about to. To indemnify somebody means to stand in their shoes. So typically in an insurance case, you have a policy that says, I will indemnify you. So if you hit somebody and it's your fault and you have full coverage, when the insurance pays for their car, they're indemnifying you. They're standing in your shoes and paying on your behalf. That is what insurance is. It's an indemnity agreement. And so essentially what we're going to have is white people out here, and really not just white people, but primarily white people, because white people have more money than black people. White people putting their money where their mouth is and offering private indemnity to people and to entities like Fearless Fund who are doing this work so that they can continue to do it, to say to them, do your work. And if something happens, we will cover you. We will support with legal fees. We will support in the work that it takes to hire lawyers to redraft language that helps you to be able to do your work in a way where it's going to fall into the new precedent set by the court. We need those types of real life indemnity, because I will tell you, when stuff like this happens, it makes it really hard for nonprofits to get insurance. It makes it really hard for them to get the things that they need to operate, because now your risk factor is higher. And so I could tell you, more than anything, what these people need right now is support that looks like dollars. And in the words of the indomitable Lisa McDowell, we appreciate the kind of money that jingles, but they need the kind of money that folds. Yeah. So if you have the kind of money that folds, you need to be willing to put it out there so that they can continue to do this work.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That was, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something I said earlier. For folks who made commitments, and that I'm using that feels like a strong word that actually I should no, I scratch that, because what we recognize in 2022, more police officers killed people. In 2023, more people, like police officers, killed people. So for me, it's the embodied practice. Yeah. At this point, like, people be having what are the rappers? You didn't
Ghost writers.
Y'all, the ghost writers are all over the internet. Where is your embodied practice?
Yeah.
So it's the lack of embodied practice, right? Now we know what a lot of us knew on a cellular level, which is y'all don't want to see change. Y'all just don't want to feel guilty. This is where we are, right? There were the people who just didn't want to feel like Derek Chauvin, right? And that was what that movement is. And so, like, them people is lost. Mm-hmm. But for the people who are saying, hey, I'm still on this path, I changed my values, I changed my beliefs. The work of changing your behaviors is lifelong, right?
Yes.
So yes. Again, if you're saying that Black Lives Matter, it's not in just relationship to policing, even though y'all failed that project. It is in creating the opportunity for generational wealth. It is in responding to the racial wealth gap. Again, the numbers exist out there, right? There was one that I really wanted to highlight, because when I read it, I just was like, it's just the median wealth for white families. So the Urban Institute reported in 2022 a 7-figure disparity in average wealth. 7 figures. That's the highest it's been. And that's after the racial reckoning, Amber.
Yes.
Right? That's not 2018. That's not 2019. That's in 2022.
Yep.
The highest level of disparity, right? The median wealth for white families was $284,000 compared to $62,000 for Black and Hispanic families. No, $62,000 for Hispanic families and $44,000 for Black families.
That's right.
We should all be embarrassed, right? So there has to be a fundamentally change in your behavior. It is not good enough that you know the words.
That's right.
That you diversified your social media feed and your bookshelf, right? Like that ain't good enough. And for all the people who love to say things like, well, I didn't own slaves. Listen, you are benefiting
That's
from the
exactly right.
ongoing systemic racism, the ongoing xenophobia, the ongoing anti-blackness. And as long as you are benefiting from, then it is your commitment has to be in doing the things to undo it.
That's exactly right. And actually doing the work to call out the attempts to revise and reimagine this country in fraudulence as a place where race neutrality is the law of the land. And I tell people all the time that it starts on a small level. You know, all of these things are related to each other. So you have school boards banning books, you have school districts banning curriculum, the teaching of accurate history. And then you put on top of that politicians who are out here saying things like this is a land where people can be whatever they want to be, or there's a two-tier justice system where an old white billionaire is being treated unjustly, but yet we forget about the two-tier justice system when we look at people like the 5 Black boys that sat in jail for weeks and months for a crime they didn't commit. Or even to this day, you have cases where public defenders are assigned to Black people who are disproportionately impacted by the ability to afford a lawyer, but all you get is a public defender. I will just tell you as a quick aside, the company I work for, we had to do some work related to Trump's recent criminal trial. Some records had to be released. And typically the way records go into a court case is just through an affidavit. The company says, these are the records. His lawyers objected, and each company had to put in a custodian of record to fly a live person there. That is the kind of stuff you are able to do when you have resources. That's the kind of needless waste of stuff. So the fact that you have Black people out here being tried and they have no access to testing, they have no access to experts, they have no access to the things that you need to meaningfully put on a case. Not just the lawyer. The lawyer needs money. The lawyer needs resources. And so I will just say that some of what is happening here is because people are not getting angry enough at this attempt that we are making to erase the negative parts of our history. And the more you erase it, the more those Legos stack on top of Fisher versus UT, the more those Legos stack on top of this case out of the 11th Circuit and the case that just came out banning abortion. Like, you have to realize that your silence is complicity.
Yeah.
Your silence is complicity.
But I would even say, how do I want to phrase it? Because some of them aren't being silent. They love to talk, but that's it.
Well, come on,
right?
Come on.
I don't have a problem talking about all the white women who have leveraged pretending to care about Black folks to create leverages and then turn around and block us on those same platforms.
When it gets too uncomfortable, come on and preach the sermon, because you ain't lying. So that's what I'm
saying. So some of y'all need to shut the hell up.
Come on and preach the sermon. Come on and preach the sermon.
Doubt, I name names. Like, So Informed is such an example. I get mad every time I think about the 3 billion people who follow her, white ass, right? So I'm just saying, like, get away from white feminism. That's one of the things I'm listing. Get away from it.
Yeah.
Like, stop investing in it. Like, don't do it. Find an intersectional approach, right? I also said, like, support grassroots and nonprofit organizations that do provide support to Black women, to Black professionals. So one of the examples I was thinking of is NABA, which is a nonprofit or association that is dedicated to, like, bridging opportunity gaps. Because opportunity hoarding, which is just moving resources to more powerful groups, is a thing that happens here, right? So supporting those kind of organizations, saying that, hey, every paycheck, I'm going to give $50 to this organization. Like you said, move mountains with your money, and then practice micro reparations, right? So micro reparations for people who are new to this platform, it's a big thing I do here, which is while we wait for the feds to provide
write that down.
actual reparations, right? You don't have to wait for Joe and them.
Yeah.
All right. You can actually make that a practice, right? And so on an individual level, how am I supporting Black folks who are historically been disenfranchised? There's this thing, it's called the Black audit, that I encourage people to do. So much like your tax audit, if you are someone who pays taxes.
Unfortunately.
Okay. And Kina said it, not Amber, y'all. So I want you to make a list. How many Black people did you give money to this year? How many dollars, right, did you give the Black creators, educators, businesses, right? The Black audit is what I call it.
Yes.
Right?
I love it.
And it's something I do, right? Like, I try to be like, okay, like, how many Black women did I give money to? I try not to tell people to do things I don't do, right? Yeah. So if Kina, the entrepreneur, is looking for a new website, what Black enterprise, like, entrepreneurs in my area are designing websites?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have to do that on purpose, Amber. You get what I'm saying? That's not something that it's not gonna just happen. You have to do it on purpose and keep practicing it. Keep practicing.
And do it quietly.
Now, why do you want people to be quiet about it? What's the fun in that?
I know. I will just say that, sometimes people who do this work can become very supercharged by it, and they want a pat on the back and they want a round of applause. And what I tell people all the time when I'm talking about this is that until equity work becomes ingrained in your ethos in the same way that you don't steal from people, you don't violently assault people. And so, when I go to the store and I buy my items and I don't steal them, I don't come out waiting for somebody to clap for me, because
you paid for it.
Yes, it's just a part of my moral compass that that's the right thing to do. And so I just do it as a part of my everyday acts. And so what bothers me the most is when you have people out here, particularly white women, who use their alliance at times as leverage. Because if you are doing that, that is capitalism. That is not sisterhood. That is not feminism. That's not womanism. That is capitalism. And you are a consumer who is exploiting me. And so until this work becomes ingrained in your ethos in the same way that all of your other moral convictions are, and it is what you are willing to do in the light and in the dark, no matter who is looking and no matter how loud the applause is, we are going to find ourselves here over and over again, because as soon as Robin DiAngelo cools down, everybody's on to the next trend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's integrity, right?
Yes.
Integrity is doing it like whoever's watching. Yes. And since we went this way, let me just say this, because I got this. If you and I sat down and announced every day what we do for our community of Black folks, we couldn't get nothing accomplished.
That's right. That's right.
That's all we would be doing. Yeah. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So in this moment, I don't even want, because at first I thought it was generational. At first I thought it was just disease. But now I'm like, no, I don't actually think it is. In this moment where everything is about receipts and doing it for the gram, people, again, that's what I'm saying, they struggle, because they're like, well, if I don't tell anybody about it, if I'm not bigging it up, it don't count, right?
Yes. And you can't use it as a way when people call you out and tell you the ways that your shit stinks. You can't pull it out as an exhibit for proof of why that's not true. So you still have to do the work and be open to growing. I mean, which is true for all of us, right? Yes. Because liberation is truly a group project, but particularly white people progressive white people have a very hard time being told sometimes that their behavior, some progressive white people, let me qualify and use my words carefully. Some progressive white people have a very hard time being told that their behavior is problematic, because once they do, they like to pull out all the things that they've done as proof to why them being problematic can't possibly be true.
Yeah.
And all of us have to remain open and humble to being corrected and to being called in when we are falling short of a standard of community care and collective love for everybody. You just have to.
Yeah. I believe in letting Black women have the last word. So but the last thing I want to say tonight is, one, I am so grateful to you because time is your most valuable resource. Y'all, and Amber gave us this free game out of the trueness of her heart. The second thing is, I don't know whoever knows who's going to see this, but we stand with the creators of the Fearless Fund, these amazing Black women who said we're going to create something for us, by us. That is an important, grounded ancestral truth. So we're so thankful for them. And thirdly, if you are someone who is going to watch this, who watch this now or in the replay, if you are a non-Black woman, if you are a white person, whatever it is, and if shame and guilt come up in your body, that's normal. Move through it though. Don't get stuck in it. I always encourage people, when we are trying to create that I love how you said it, liberation is a group project. If we're trying to manifest shared humanity, all of us, we've been drinking the same water, right?
Yes.
So there are moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't me. I have the ick moment. Move through it though. Redirect yourself. Don't get stuck in that. All right. Do not watch this and be like, oh my gosh, I made $260,000 on the terrorism. No, that's not what we're here for. We're here to guide you to a better, deeper truth. So make space for that. All right. All right. Where do you want to end us at? Where's your benediction for us, sis?
I would just say that, I lament the ways that we use the law as a weapon and not as a shield. And, in my own little ways, in my own little corners of the world, I'm just doing what I can to call it out and to try to remedy it. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity. And, I co-sign everything you said. I don't think we need to say nothing else.
All right. Well, let the church say amen.
Amen.
Y'all, please follow Brokish, the podcast. We're going to give Amber her flowers. If you want to get into Amber's DM with gifts, not questions. She ain't about to be your lawyer. She's not about to be your lawyer. All right, well, put that out there. She ain't gonna be the people's lawyer.
I'm happy to refer, but listen, capitalism is gonna capitalism. So the very large company that I work for says that I cannot be nobody else's lawyer but their own. But I do as much as I possibly can where I can. So I'm always happy to point people in the right direction.
All right, have a good night, and thanks so much for joining in. And until next time, continue to do good work. Bye.
Bye, y'all. Love you, sis.